Good evening. Welcome to another night of the Dine and Learn. This week, I thought we would take a break from Hilchos Nedarim, which we're learning, and talk about the latest conversion controversy that's going on in Eretz Israel. Seems like a year can't go by without another controversy about conversion. And the latest one, which is really ripped from the headlines, is unusual in many ways. What's going on now in Eretz Israel, and this is from what I understand from the news reports that I've seen and a few emails among rabbis that I've seen, any the details are wrong, I apologize. Normally, conversion in Israel is done by the Rabbinate, the chief rabbinate, but now some religious Zionist rabbis have announced they're creating their own doesnt to do conversions. They've actually already done a few, and this is creating a big controversy for two reasons. And we're going to go through them, Mr. Shem, tonight. And the two reasons are, one, political in the best sense of the term, and the other reason is halachic, which is also a good term. So from the political perspective, you have to think about Israeli society and how it works. You have this Rabbinate. Now, who does the Rabbinate represent? Who does it cater to? So generally speaking, the secular, the traditional Jews there don't particularly care much what the Rabbinate says. The Haredim, I don't know what term we'd use, ultra-Orthodox, the Black Hatters, they don't particularly care much what the Rabbinate has to say either. Now, the Rabbinate controls certain parts of Israeli life. They control
who the Rabbinate is?
The Rabbinate, the chief rabbinate of Israel, and the chief rabbis of all the major cities. That's a government bureaucracy, you could say. It's an arm of the government. There are two chief rabbis of Israel right now. There's Rabbi David Lau, who's Ashkenazi, and there is Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, who is a Sephardi. And they appoint dayanim. They appoint chief rabbis, and they fund the rabbis and various city services and religious services. So generally speaking, the Rabbinate, at least from the outsider's perspective, controls three major parts of Israel. Really, they control more, but they control conversion, they control marriage and divorce, and they control kashrus. Now, anyone who gets married in Israel, and burials and mikvahs, they control many other things. Now, the truth is that they don't control anything completely. Even burials. My great-uncle was buried on a moshav, and the Rabbinate had nothing to say about it because it was perfectly legal to do it without the Rabbinate. You can get married, you can just cross the international borders. Now, if you cross to the north, to the east, or to the south, you're going to have trouble in those Arab countries. But if you go over across to an island like Cyprus, or you go to Europe, it's easy to just get married without the Rabbinate, and you come back and they have to validate, they have to recognize that marriage. And there are many other aspects that they do not control completely, including conversions. There are conversion courts in Bnei Brak. Reb Nissen Karelitz has a conversion court, and people go to him, they convert, and then the Rabbinate, afterwards, they recognize that. You could go to America, you can convert through certain approved mechanisms in America. It's actually easier to convert, to get your conservative or reform conversion recognized in Israel than Orthodox, because Orthodox, you have to go through all sorts of official rules. Conservative and reform conversion, just go to Israel and they're required to recognize it. And there are other places in the world. So the Rabbinate doesn't necessarily control everything. And that's really the political issue that we have right now. So who cares what the Rabbinate has to say? You can get your private hechsher. You can get your private conversion. And you can even now, there are rabbis who do, certainly the Haredi community, who do their private weddings, and the Rabbinate just signs on and recognizes it afterwards. So who cares what the Rabbinate has to say? It's the religious Zionists. It's Dati Leumim. And what happened over the past few years is that the religious Zionists are getting fed up, or they are unhappy with how the Rabbinate has been performing over the past few decades, and they have started doing their own private hechshers. You go to Israel and you want to eat kosher, right? So they have the Rabbinate, Mahadran, but they also have all sorts of various badatzim. They have Landau, they have Chasam Sofer, all sorts of other hechshers. Those are all Haredim. Now the religious Zionists are starting to do their own hechshers outside the Rabbinate. Recently, they started doing weddings outside the Rabbinate. I have a friend. He's from Baltimore. He lives in Israel. Rabbi Eli Fisher, he does marriages out. He could be arrested. He doesn't expect to be arrested, but it's technically illegal what he's doing. But he does marriages outside the Rabbinate. And now what's happening is that conversions, the religious Zionists at Tilumim, are starting to do conversions on their own outside the Rabbanut, which raises the question of what's left for the Rabbanut. Not much. Burials and mikvahs. So there is objections from people who see ideologically, politically, that the Rabbanut is a good thing. There are people, particularly students of Rav Kook's son, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who saw the world in messianic terms. All of Klal Yisrael returns to Eretz Yisrael. We gain control over the old city. There's a whole progression there, and he believes we're living in the footsteps of Mashiach, and they see Ki Mitzion Tetzei Sorah. Torah is supposed to come from Yerushalayim, and eventually we'll have a Sanhedrin, a centralized religious authority in the Sanhedrin, in a Nasi. So right now, the chief rabbinate is the beginnings of that. So if we're taking steps towards a centralized rabbinic authority, a Sanhedrin. So if we get rid of the Rabbanut, then we just took a step backwards. And to them, that's a big deal. They consider it a terrible thing. So to them, the political step of opening up your own private bezdin, to them that's politically destroying the Rabbanut. Because, and this, so for example, Rav Yaakov Ariel is one of the big poskim in Israel among the religious Zionists. Last week's shir was based on his tshuva, or one of his tshuvas. So Rav Yaakov Ariel says, look, I'm not worried with what this particular bezdin is going to do. This bezdin is being started by Rav Nachum Rabinovich. Rav Nachum Rabinovich is a Talmid of Rav Ruderman from Ner Yisrael. He was close with Rav Henkin. He's not a young man. He was close with Rav Henkin. He was close with Gedalia Felder. He's considered a posik of the top rank. He is opening up this private bezdin. I have his second volume of tshuvas here, Siach Nachum. He wrote a parish on the entire Mishnah Torah, Yad Pshuta. He's considered a Talmid Chacham of the first rank, and he's been a posek for 50-some years. So, okay, fine, he starts his private bezdin. I'm not so worried what he's going to do. But says Rav Ariel, what's the next step? Every rabbi is going to hang out their shingle and say, I'm going to be doing my own conversions, and it'll be the Wild West in Israel like it's the Wild West in America. And we don't quite know whose conversions are good, and that's bad for the converts. Right? There's a mitzvah of Avas Ager, to love the converts, and if there's a cloud of suspicion hanging around any convert, that's the exact opposite of loving him, and it's very difficult for them. Better you should let the Rabbanut control it. We might not like everything the Rabbanut does. We'll try to fix that, Emir Hashem, but to create a Wild West situation, that's going to destroy the Rabbanut and create a lot of sorrows for Klal Yisrael. So that's the number one objection that they have to this step. And that's political. Political in the best sense of how Klal Yisrael should be set up politically. Ideologically, they believe this is a step very badly in the wrong direction. Now, halachically, it's a different story. The whole concept of this bezdin, as I understand it, is that they're going to be converting children. Children who go to the religious public schools. In Israel, they have two public school systems. They have the regular public schools, and then they have Dati Mamlachti, which is a religious public school, and then there are all sorts of other schools, systems, including Chinuch Hasmai. So these are kids. Their mothers are not halachically Jewish. Generally speaking, they're Russian immigrants. And when the Russians came to Israel, many, many people who were not halachically Jewish, hundreds of thousands, maybe 300,000, I've heard the estimate, non-halachic Jews came to Israel, and they all think they're Jews, and their kids, of the women, also think they're Jews. And there are kids who are not halachically Jewish, whose mother is clearly not Jewish, who are in religious public schools. What do you do with those kids? They're socializing, they'll probably marry their classmates. So this could cause halachic intermarriage by people who all think they're Jewish.
Why would they be in the religious public schools?
Because the public schools have to admit them. They think they're Jewish.
But the parents have to choose that.
Yeah, so you might not you, but a parent might not be from, but they want their kid to get a traditional Jewish education. They want them to be founded in, have a good root in tradition. They like the tradition. So the kids, they're not Shomer Shabbos. They don't keep necessarily strict kosher, but they want the kids to get some sort of a Jewish education. And there are the Mitzias, it's a reality. There are kids like that in these public schools, religious public schools. So Rav Nachum Rabinovich opened, and the Rabbanut will not convert them unless their parents agree to be Shomer Shabbos and keep kosher, and the mother will dress in a skirt, so the Rabbanut will not convert them. So Rabinovich opened up his bezdin to convert them. And he has a solid reason why he would do that. He wrote a tshuva almost 20 years ago explaining his reasoning, so I don't have to guess at it. He literally wrote it. all boils down to a Gemara in Ksubis. The Gemara in Ksubis in Daf Yud Aleph talks about how a child converts to Judaism, and it's a problem. Because in order to convert to Judaism, you have to have Milah, you have to have Tevilah. I mean, if you're a man, you have to have Milah, you have to have Tevilah, you have to go to the mikvah, and you have to accept on yourself the mitzvahs. Now, accepting the mitzvahs is the fundamental aspect of conversion. A child does not have das, is not mature intellectually, and is not capable of making a claim that he accepts mitzvahs. So how can any child convert? How can people who adopt a child from South America, from China, from Russia, from Eastern Europe, how can they convert this baby? An infant, clearly an infant cannot accept mitzvahs on himself or herself. So how can any of those conversions work? It doesn't make sense. This is the Gemara addresses. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, Ger Katan, Matbilin also al das Bezdin. The Bezdin, the conversion court, the three rabbis, they accept. I'm being imprecise in how I translate it because it's a different interpretation, different commentaries. But the Bezdin effectively accepts the mitzvahs for the child. My kamash malan. So what does this mean? The zechus hu lo. It's a zechus for the child to become Jewish. It's a merit. It's good for him. V'zakin la'adam shelo b'fanov. Generally speaking, there's a halacha in monetary matters that I can accept something on your behalf if it's a benefit for you. I find a dollar bill and I said, this is great, I want this for Moshe. I pick it up with having in mind that I acquire it on Moshe's behalf. It is now Moshe's dollar. I can't spend it. It belongs to Moshe. Same thing here. The Bezdin determines that being Jewish is a zechus, it's good for the kid, so they can accept the mitzvahs on behalf of the child, and zakin adam shelo b'fanov, the child becomes Jewish. Which means, in any conversion of a child, an infant, or even up to older ages, the child does not have to accept mitzvahs. The Bezdin does. So, this raises the question of when is it a zechus for the child to become Jewish? The argument can be made, and Rav Kook. So this came up in 1864. That's when we know the first big tshuva shiloh came up in New Orleans towards the end of the Civil War, long time ago. Rabbi Bernard Eloi, who was a rabbi in New Orleans, he sent this shiloh to a rabbinic journal in Europe, and there are some responses to it. He said, the child of a Jewish father and a Gentile mother, they want to convert the baby. They're not shomer. They don't keep any commandments. Can I convert this child? So there were two main tshuvas on this. Reb Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher was a Talmud of Rabbi Kiva Eger, and a very famous Talmud Chacham. He wrote a tshuva saying, yes, it's a zechus for the child to become Jewish. And Rav Azriel Hildesheimer of Berlin, he wrote a tshuva saying, absolutely not. The kid's not going to be shomer mitzvah. So what does it mean? It means before the child converts, any avera he does, it's not an avera. He could eat a cheeseburger day and night. I mean, an infant can't eat a cheeseburger day and night. It's bad for their health, bad for anyone's health. But so throughout the rest of the life, every cheeseburger that child eats, if he's not converted, is not an avera. You convert him, boom, avera after avera, they stack up. It is not as a chutz for him. He'll be punished. We believe in reward and punishment. So whether it's sooner or later, eventually this neshama will be punished for all the sins that he commits, basically, contravening the Torah's commandments. So you convert him. It's not only is it not as a chus, it's a terrible chova. It's bad for him. You can't convert someone who's not going to be shomer mitzvos, especially a kid, because it's not as a chus, and the Gemara says it has to be as a chus. That's Rabbi Zriel Hildesheimer's psak, and generally speaking, the later posts can follow that. Rav Kook was asked at Shiloh, and he said, only if it's very likely, there's no certainty in the world, but if it's very likely that this child will grow up to be shomer Torah mitzvos, only then can you convert this child. So when we're talking about religious Zionist rabbis in Eretz Israel, the Talmidim, the disciples of Rav Kook, are understandably very strict about this, and they don't like what Rabinovich, who is an American, wants to do, because Rav Kook held you're not allowed to convert a child unless you know he's going to be shomer mitzvos. So, but there are two other opinions, generally speaking. The other opinion, one other opinion, and this is what Rav Soloveitchik held, was that if there's a real possibility that this kid will grow up to be from, you don't need to use an actuarial chart to figure out how likely it is. If you send him to a yeshiva, you send him to a day school, there's a really good chance he'll be from, and therefore that's enough of a zechus. And therefore Soloveitchik's policy, and I know people who personally experienced this, his policy was, if the parents, even if they're not Shomer Shabbos, even if they don't keep kosher, if they commit to sending their child to a day school, specifically Ramaz, so then he permitted it. Let me just tell you a story. When I was in summer camp, 1991, the summer, I was a counselor. And I remember one night that was a Camp Magen Avraham, Moshe, you were there? So in Heller, in Avram Chaim Heller, so one of the Rebbeim, I forget his name, he was telling a story about this. There was this one other counselor there who went to Ramaz. Brilliant guy, very really knows how to learn. So he was talking about Ramaz, and it was late night, he was just telling stories. So he said this rabbi had a cousin, he was a Rebbe in the Mir. He had a cousin who was not Shomer Torah Mitzvos. They couldn't have a child, they adopted a child, and they went to however the psak was, will only convert the child if you send him to Ramaz. It's a very liberal day school, Orthodox day school. They agreed, they sent the kid to Ramaz. Sof, Maisa, this rabbi saying, my cousin is Shomer Shabbos. Because they adopted the child went to Ramaz, he became from, the parents became from afterwards. He said, brilliant, good. Those are for every good story, there's a bad story. I'm not denying that. That's Rav Soloveitchik's opinion. There is a Rabinovich, who has an even more lenient opinion based on a Tosfos in Sanhedrin. Let me read you this Tosfos. You won't believe it. Tosfos in Sanhedrin on Samad Ches Amad Beis says like this. I didn't believe it either. In fact, I don't think this is pshat in the Tosfos. But this is how the words say what Rabinovich claims they say. Okay. So Venira. So the Tosfos Kasha is the whole concept of Zachin La'adam Shelo B'fanav is only Derabanan. How can you convert someone Midirabanan? It doesn't make sense. Conversion has to be biblical. The rabbis can't make up that someone's Jewish. And maybe they can. Maybe that's the answer, but that's the Kasha. So Tosfos answers Venira de Zechia de Gerus. This whole concept of a benefit of Gerus Lo Dami L'Shar Zechuyos. It's not a zechus like everything else in the Torah. Demasha Bezdin Matbilin also. The fact that a Bezdin allows him to convert, to go to the mikvah, Einam Zochin Ba'avur, it's not that they accept on his behalf, Elahu Zoche Be'asmo. No, this child, this infant, this is a chus on his own, Uve Gufo, and in his body, Shenase Ger, that he becomes a convert, V'nichnas Tachas Karfe Hashchina. The very fact that this child becomes Jewish means this is a chus. His neshama is not part of the Jewish people. We all care about him. I mean, we care about everybody. But he's part of the Jewish family. We embrace him as part of the Jewish family. That alone, says Tosfos, is a chus. Okay, no, so he'll be doing averos. We can't condone that. We don't appreciate that. But the very fact that his neshama is not part of Klal Yisrael, that's a chus. So Rabinovich holds, no matter what, this is a chus. You might say, well, that's crazy. Ramosha says it. Ramosha has a tshuva. Ramosha Feinstein. So should Igros Moshe, Even Ezer, Chilik Dalet, Simon Chavav. Here, that's this Shiloh. This is Gimel here. Teachers in a day school who have kids in their class whose mothers converted conservative or reform. They're not halachically Jewish. Al pi halacha, the way we understand it, these kids are not Jewish. So you're not allowed to teach Torah to Gentiles. It's something I've discussed elsewhere. So are they allowed to teach this class, which has a lot of technically non-Jewish kids in it? So it's a big Shiloh. Ramosha agonizes over it because he doesn't want these teachers to lose their parnasa. Literally, these teachers could starve. Their families could starve if they can't find a job in this day school. So Ramosha has a lot of reasons why. It could be mutter. He fetches. He works really hard because this is such a difficult shaila. He comes up with many different reasons why it could be mutter. And then he says like this. He says, "Aval ha'efshar l'sakin." No, we can fix the whole problem. The problem will go away. Desakatanim yegairu. Convert the kids. Right? And we're talking about the children of conservative and reform converted mothers who are not Shomer Shabbos. These people don't keep kosher. Rav Moshe says convert them. Kihim einam srichim kabbalas mitzvos. They don't need to accept the mitzvos, their children. V'gairum al das bezdin. Convert them with, let the bezdin have it in mind. V'hu zechus lahem. Now he explains two reasons. It's a zechus for them, two reasons. Ki mikevan shalomdim b'vei sefer dati. They're learning in a religious school. Eitzel morim yirei shemayim. Their teachers are from. Harei matzoi. It happens. She's gadu liot shomrei Torah. They'll grow up to be from. That's Rav Soloveitchik's svar. They could grow up to be from. They could not, but they could. So it's enough of a zechus. Shelachein av shehu safik. Even though it's a question, it's a doubt. Hu zechus vadai. It's definitely enough to be considered as a chus, and the conversion is good. Vegam, second, totally separate explanation. Afim lo yizgadlu liyoshomer Torah, even if they don't grow up to be from, mistabish is a chus. It still is a chus. Derishe Yisrael, sheyesh lahem kedushas Yisrael. They might be Rishaim. They might be terrible. They might not be Rishaim. They might just be non-from people. But they have a kedushas Yisrael. So that's a chus. Umitzvasan she'osin hu mitzvah. Every mitzvah they do is a mitzvah. V'haveros hu lahem kishkaga. Every sin that they do, they didn't grow up from. So it's they're tinak shenishba. So they don't get the sins, they only get the mitzvahs. So think of that. You convert them, suddenly they get mitzvah after mitzvah after mitzvah. It's a great zechus to them. Says Ramosha, you can convert them even if you know they're not going to be from.
But if you teach them in yeshiva, not eat cheeseburgers, and eat cheeseburgers, you can't claim to the nishba.
That gets into what's considered a tinak shenishba. I disagree. There is such a svara. There are people who are stricter on the concept of tinak shenish, but generally speaking, the accepted way is no. We don't teach. Our teachers aren't that great. Our community isn't that great. The whole environment isn't that great. But there are poskim, the Minchas Elazar, the Munkatcher Rebbe, who said, as long as they know that such a thing is Torah, if they don't follow it, they're not tinak shenishba. They're all rishoyim, and he's very strict on many things that relate to that because he was a Munkatcher Rebbe. That's what he did. Okay, so according to Rabinovich, they're going to a religious school. They're most likely not going to be from, but even still, it's a zechus, and that's how he says. It doesn't matter whether they end up becoming from or not. It's a zechus for them to join Klal Yisrael, and therefore the best thing to do it for an adult. It doesn't work. An adult has to accept mitzvahs, but the best thing to do it for them. For children, and therefore he has converted children from Russian families where the mother is not Jewish, and the children go to a religious school. He's done it, and he has Ramosha to rely on. He happens to be a great posek himself, but Ramosha says it. Now the others who disagree with him, they're Talmidim of Rav Kook, who was the strictest, and Rav Elyashiv is also strict, and they say no, that's not a conversion, that's not good. So the people who disagree with this private bezin that Rav Rabinovich set up have a political reason that they're worried this will destroy the Rabbinate, and they also have a religious reason that they just simply disagree with how the standards that they have for conversion, even though they all admit Rav Rabinovich is a Talmid Chacham Muvak, he's a great posek, and he's also, following Rav Moshe Feinstein. So that's, I think, the status. That's the latest conversion controversy, which the media tends to exaggerate and make into worse than it actually is.
I don't know if it's relevant, but I heard once an opinion that if a katan is converted, it's conditional, and they're waiting to see what does the person do when he turns 13 years old.
Yes.
Does he do a fantastic mitzvah day, or does he do a fantastic avera, or which way does he choose?
So the way the Gemara explains it, I only read the beginning of the Gemara. The continuation of the Gemara is that when they become bar bat mitzvah, they have the right to say, I don't want to be Jewish. And that at that point, they have the right to say, you did it for me, you did it to me, what'd you do to me? I don't like it. And at that point in time, they're allowed to, and then the conversion is retroactively nullified. So that does exist. I didn't want to get into that, but you're absolutely right. Okay, I don't think I mentioned it, but next week, Emir Hashem will be Tuesday night, and I think that's the final one of the season. So thank you very much, and have a good night. And have a good night.